It started with the promotion. Everything spiraled out of control after that. When I accepted the role of CFO at my company, I thought it was going to be a fresh chapter. More income, more stability for our family. But instead, it turned into a year of mounting frustration and disappointment. The day I filed for divorce, I wasn't angry. I was just done. Done with the arguments, done with the reckless spending, done with the feeling that my voice didn't matter. Meredith and I had been together for 13 years, married for 10. When we first met, she was this vibrant, warm person, always full of ideas, always the one to brighten the room. We built a life together. Two amazing kids, Ellie and Max. We were the kind of couple that got along easily, or so I thought. There were no infidelities, no huge fights, just small differences that seemed manageable. I liked to plan, to save. She liked to live in the moment. We'd always met in the middle until suddenly we weren't meeting at all. At first, the promotion felt like a blessing. The pay bump was significant, and I thought we could finally breathe a little easier. I told Meredith about the raise, and I remember cautioning her that it didn't mean we could start spending wildly. Just because we can afford more, but doesn't mean we should. She nodded, distracted, and I took her lack of response as agreement. I was wrong. The spending started slowly. A new wardrobe here, a high-end coffee machine there. Then it escalated. She redecorated the entire living room, perfectly good furniture replaced with trendy, expensive pieces. When I questioned her, she shrugged it off. "It's just money," she said, as if that made it okay. We had these circular arguments that never led anywhere. I'd try to show her the numbers, and she'd accuse me of being stingy. "You're CFO now," she'd say. "Why shouldn't we enjoy it?" I'd push back, and she'd remind me how hard she worked at home, how she was raising the kids while I traveled to our work. It always ended the same way, her shutting me down, me retreating to my office, tension settling over the house like a storm cloud. Then came the Miami trip. That's when everything changed. I came home one evening to find a babysitter at the house instead of Meredith. She'd hired someone to care for Ellie and Max without even telling me. I called her, and after hours of no response, she finally picked up. She was on a plane with her parents, headed to Miami for a week. She didn't ask, didn't check in. She just left. "I deserve a break," she said when I confronted her. "I've been holding everything together, and you're too busy to notice." When I tried to explain why her actions were so concerning, she hung up on me. That night, I stared at the ceiling in our bedroom, feeling like I was losing control of my own life. I thought about all the conversations we'd had, the promises to rein in spending, the way she always dismissed my concerns. I thought about the kids, about what kind of example we were setting. And I realized I couldn't keep doing this. I had reached my limit. The next day, I called the bank and froze her credit cards. I contacted a lawyer. For the first time in years, I felt like I was taking back control. But as I sat in my office later reviewing the paperwork, a new emotion crept in. Doubt. Was I doing the right thing? Would this hurt the kids more than it hurt me? And what if Meredith truly wanted to change? When she returned home days later, the house felt colder than ever. She apologized, of course. Tears, promises, excuses. But I'd heard it all before. This time I was prepared. I handed her the divorce papers, told her it was over, and closed the door as she stood on the porch, pleading. I felt a twinge of guilt, but I reminded myself that I'd given her countless chances. This wasn't impulsive. This was necessary. At least that's what I kept telling myself as I sat in the kitchen alone. Now, with the papers filed and the house divided, I'm left wondering if I should have tried harder. For the kids, for the years we'd spent together, for the life we'd built. I love my children more than anything, and I don't want them to think I gave up on their mother. But I also know I can't live in a home where my concerns are ignored, where I feel like a stranger. I don't know if there's a way back from this, but right now I'm not sure I'd even take it if there was. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, muted conversations, and awkward handoffs with the kids. Every time Meredith came to pick them up or drop them off, she'd try to talk to me. I kept my responses short. I wasn't ready to hear more apologies, and I wasn't ready to open up again. I told myself that distance was what we both needed. The children didn't fully understand what was happening, but they felt it. Ellie asked me more than once why Mommy wasn't staying home, and Max kept running to the door whenever he heard it open, expecting her. I did my best to comfort them, but their confusion only deepened my own doubts. Meredith sent text after text. Some were heartfelt, apologizing for not listening to me, for spending so much money, for leaving on that trip without telling me. Others were defensive, accusing me of being controlling or reminding me that she'd been the one holding the family together for so long. A few were downright angry, demanding to know how I could throw away 13 years of marriage. I read them all and responded to none. What was the point? I'd made my decision. But then I'd see the kids laughing as they played in the yard, and I'd wonder if I was making the wrong choice. I didn't want them growing up in a broken home. I wanted them to have the stability I had always promised them. I told myself that divorce didn't mean I was abandoning them. It meant I was taking a stand, showing them that some behaviors couldn't be tolerated. But the guilt lingered, gnawing at me in quiet moments. One evening my phone buzzed with a new message. It was Meredith again. This one was different. It was longer than the others, more raw. She admitted she'd been selfish, that she'd ignored my warnings about our finances. She said she'd been spending money because she felt like it was the only thing she could control, the only way to distract herself from feeling lonely and unfulfilled. She apologized, not just for the Miami trip, but for all the ways she'd hurt me. And then she asked if I would meet her for coffee, just once so we could talk things through. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't know what to say. On one hand, I wanted to tell her it was too late, that we were past the point of reconciliation. On the other hand, I felt a flicker of hope. What if she was sincere? What if this was the first step toward real change? Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet. We chose a small cafe near the house, a neutral place where we could speak without the pressure of home or family. When she walked in, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with so many years ago. She looked tired, yes, but also determined. She sat down across from me, hands trembling slightly, and started talking before I could even say hello. "I'm not proud of how I've acted," she began. "I know I've let you down. I let us all down. I thought I could fix things by making everything around me perfect. Perfect house, perfect clothes, perfect trips. But all I did was make it worse." I listened, not interrupting, as she explained how she'd been feeling. She talked about the isolation of staying home while I worked long hours, the pressure to keep the kids happy, the guilt she felt for not contributing more financially. She admitted that she'd been using shopping as a coping mechanism, a way to fill the void she couldn't quite name, and then she apologized again. This time it felt real. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," she said. "I don't even know if you want to try again. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. I'll cut back on spending. I'll get help if I need to. I just don't want to lose what we have. I don't want to lose our family." Her voice broke at the end, and she wiped away tears before looking at me. For the first time in months, I felt the wall between us start to crack. I wasn't ready to forgive everything. I wasn't ready to say I wanted her back, but I was ready to talk, to really talk, and see where that would lead. Tap deeper. We sat in that cafe for over an hour, talking in a way we hadn't done in years. I told her about the stress I'd been feeling, about how I'd been trying so hard to keep everything together for the family, and how I felt like I was constantly being undermined by her spending. I admitted I'd been bitter, that I'd started resenting the long hours I worked because it seemed like no matter how much I made, it was never enough. I didn't sugarcoat anything. If we were going to have this conversation, I wanted to be honest. Meredith listened quietly, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. When she finally spoke, she surprised me. "I didn't see it that way," she said. "I guess I thought if I made the house nicer, or bought things for the kids, or for us, it would feel like I was doing something important, like I was contributing. But I can see now that it wasn't helping. It just made you feel like I didn't care about all the hard work you were doing." I nodded, letting her words sink in. It wasn't just her spending that had driven a wedge between us. It was the lack of communication, the unspoken expectations we'd each placed on the other. We'd been so busy living side by side that we'd forgotten how to live together. I realized in that moment that neither of us had meant to hurt the other. We'd both been trying, in our own flawed ways, to make the marriage work. When we finally left the cafe, we agreed to keep the conversation going. It wouldn't be easy. There was a lot of trust to rebuild, a lot of wounds to heal, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we might actually have a chance. When I got home that evening, the house was quiet. Meredith was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a cup of tea, her eyes red from crying. She looked up when I walked in, her expression a mix of sorrow and exhaustion. "I don't know what else to say," she murmured. "I've apologized. I've tried to explain. I don't know if it's enough." I set down my bag and walked over to her. "It's not just about words, Meredith. It's about actions. Words mean nothing if we don't back them up." She nodded slowly, taking a sip of her tea. "I know. And I'm trying. I really am." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavy, but not unbearable. It was the silence of two people standing on the edge of something new, something uncertain. I could see the regret in her eyes, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She didn't need to say how sorry she was anymore. I could feel it. "Meredith," I finally said, my voice quiet, "I want us to move forward, but I need to know that you're willing to put in the work. I need to see that things will change, not just for me, but for our family. We both made mistakes. I won't deny that, but we can't stay stuck in the same pattern." She looked at me, her face a mixture of hope and fear. "I want that too," she said softly. "I want us to be better for the kids, for us." I nodded. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were still unresolved feelings, still wounds that needed time to heal. But it was a start. The days that followed were not easy. We faced difficult conversations, moments of frustration and doubt. But there were also moments of understanding, of small gestures that reminded me why I had fallen in love with her in the first place. It wasn't the grand, sweeping apology or the expensive gifts that mattered. It was the effort, the willingness to try. As for Meredith, she started to see how her actions had hurt not just me, but herself and the children. The guilt she carried was a heavy burden, but instead of letting it crush her, she used it to drive change. She began to cut back on spending, finding joy in simpler things. She reached out to old friends, reconnecting with the parts of herself she had lost along the way. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was genuine. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe we'll find our way back to the love we once had, or maybe we'll discover something new, something stronger. What I do know is that we're both committed to trying. That's all we can do. Try, learn, and grow. And if there's one lesson I've taken from this, it's that relationships require constant effort, constant communication. Love is not a passive feeling. It's an active choice we make every day. It's not enough to say I love you. We have to show it, in the big moments, in the small. We have to be willing to listen, to forgive, and to change. To anyone watching or reading this, I would say, take the time to truly understand the people you care about. Don't assume you know their struggles or their motives. Talk to them. Really talk. It might not fix everything, but it's a start. And sometimes a start is all you need. What do you think? Have you faced challenges like this in your own relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories. Leave a comment below and let's keep the conversation going.